I'm still recovering from this incident. It was a typical Saturday for my husband and I. We woke up in the morning, made a cup each of coffee in our Keurig machine, and then chatted about what our plans were for the day. This weekend we decided to do the regular grocery trip and then stop over by Home Depot to return items that my husband had bought for kitchen renovations but no longer needed as he was finished. We would then tidy up the house a bit and I would cook dinner. We would watch a movie on Netflix and call it a night. This was one of the most easygoing weekends we've had since we moved into our new home about 6 months ago. We pulled up to the Walmart that was 5 minutes from our house. The parking lot was packed with cars. We had to wait 12 minutes until someone was unloading their bags into their car. Even with our signal on, people were impatiently honking behind us to move. It was pretty frustrating, but it got worse the moment we took the shopping cart into the store. The place was packed with shoppers, sort of like when the pandemic first hit and people were going crazy stocking up with toilet paper. We went up and down the aisles grabbing whatever was on our list and had to skip some items because they were sold out. Some shelves were pretty much bare, and after speaking to a merchandiser, we were told there was no information of when it would be restocked. It was annoying that grocery prices had gone up so much. In fact, we were spending nearly double the amount for the same things compared to 3 years ago, and still there were shortages on most things. We finally pushed the cart to the checkout counter, which the lineup went as far back as into the aisles. We chatted with each other to pass the time. Nearly 45 minutes later, we finally were up at the front as the cashier began to scan the items. We quickly bagged our purchases and hurried out the door. After unloading our groceries, we drove to the Home Depot that was on the other side of the shopping center. After the 2.5 hours we had spent in Walmart, I didn't want to go back into another store. I told my husband Eric I would wait for him in the car. I went on my phone and browsed for online recipes for tonight's dinner. Shortly after, Eric returned to the car and we drove home. It was around 3:30 p.m. as we unloaded the car and brought the groceries inside. "Helen," he said, "while you unpack and put away the stuff, I'll get the laundry started." "That's a good idea," I said. "It'll be twice as fast to get things done so we can relax sooner." After I was done with organizing the fridge and cupboards, I fluffed the couch pillows, wiped down the coffee table, swept the floor, and vacuumed the area rug. I put some essential oil blends into the diffuser and turned it on. In no time, the living room was smelling fresh and relaxing. My husband was wiping the powder room, mirror, and countertop when I told him I would go take a shower before preparing dinner. "Sure," he said. "The laundry is about 10 minutes left to dry. I'll bring you a pair of your PJs and leave it on the bed for you." My husband was really the most sweetest and thoughtful person ever. After being out in the cold this afternoon, a hot shower was just the thing to have me feeling relaxed. I opened the stand-in shower door and got out. I towel dried my body and then hair. I wrapped the towel around me and walked into the room, to the bed where my fleece PJs were placed neatly. The freshness from the clothes and the warmth from the dry was literally the most favorite part of doing laundry. I changed and then went downstairs. Eric was seated on the couch on his phone. "You look calm and happy," he said. "Yes, I feel like I could just go to bed now." "It's only 7:30, laughed Eric. "Maybe in a few hours. How about we try an edible tonight?" Once in a while, Eric and I indulged in a little bit of cannabis to help us unwind and fall asleep. Plus, if we had dinner or something to eat while the edible kicked in, the food would just taste incredible. It was like our senses were heightened and our palates could literally taste the flavors in different ways. Perhaps similar to how those professional chefs on TV would take a bite or sip of something and point out the exact hidden ingredients. "So," I said, "do you want the sour key gummy or a cookies and cream chocolate piece?" Said Eric. "I don't know. Are they both the same dosage of THC and CBD?" "Yes," I said, reading the package. "Cool," he replied. "I'll go for the chocolate." I broke a piece of the bar that was labeled 20 milligrams and gave it to Eric. I broke a piece for myself and ate it. The chocolate was delicious. It tasted exactly like the Hershey's cookies and cream bar. Eric told me he would head upstairs to shower and was looking forward to dinner. I went into the kitchen and took out the ingredients to make spaghetti and meatballs with a side of Caesar salad and garlic bread. The day before, my mom had dropped off fresh raw turkey balls she had mixed together with spices and herbs. All I had to do was cook them. I put a little oil into the Ninja Foodie and threw in the meatballs on medium-high heat. I cooked them until the outer side was well and brown and the inside was slightly cooked. I then added the red onions to absorb the flavors from the fat of the turkey. I emptied it out of the Ninja and placed it in a bowl. I then boiled the spaghetti and then added the tomato sauce and mixed back in the meatballs and onions. The best part with the Ninja was the entire meal was prepared in one pot with no extra mess or dishes to wash. I grilled the bread and mixed the salad. I then plated the food and brought it to the coffee table in the living room. I took some orange juice and carbonated mango-flavored water and mixed it together to create a virgin mimosa. By the time I'd cleaned up the kitchen, Eric had come downstairs and was smiling at the plate of food. I could tell his appetite was huge, especially after consuming the edible. I too was feeling the euphoric effects. "What is tonight's feature film?" he asked. "Well," I said, "it's number 2 right now on Netflix. It's called A Weekend Away, a thriller crime genre." I played the movie as we ate our dinner. Eric was really enjoying his food as his plate was clean within minutes and he was ready for dessert. I, on the other hand, was eating slow and trying to follow the plot of the movie, but my brain was literally zoning out. I paused the movie and put the plates into the kitchen sink. I then grabbed 2 pints of Haagen-Dazs matcha green tea ice cream from the freezer. I handed Eric his spoon and ice cream. He didn't hesitate to dig in as he opened the lid so quickly. "I'm sure this guy committed the murder. He doesn't look too trustworthy," said Eric. "You literally listed every main character in this movie as a suspect," I said, "except the one person who is dead. Might as well consider her a part of her own demise." We both looked at each other in that moment and burst out laughing. We were rolling around on the couch and laughing for a solid 7 minutes until our eyes watered and we were gasping for air. Our stomachs hurt so much we thought we would pass out. I think a key reason we were doing this was we were pretty high at that point. 3/4 of the way through the movie, I was beginning to feel like I would knock out on the couch. I looked at the time. It was 12:45 a.m. I told Eric I would head to bed and finish the rest of the movie tomorrow morning. He said, "All good, I'll meet you up in bed soon." The moment my head hit the pillow, I knocked out. I have no clue what time my husband came to bed, but I was suddenly awakened by a banging sound. I picked up my phone and saw it was 3:03 in the morning. Eric was rolled over and in deep sleep. I lay still for a minute. It sounded like someone was in the house. I had to calm down and listen carefully again, as I was still under the effects from the edible, and my brain could be playing tricks on me. I shouldn't be jumping to conclusions. I heard the banging coming from our front door, as if someone was trying to break open the door, followed by intense knocking and multiple ringing of the doorbell. I tried to wake Eric up by saying his name and touching his shoulder, but he was still lying in the same position. I knew he was also still very high. The banging got louder and my fear increased. Whoever this person was adamant to get in. I shook the hell out of Eric, screaming, "There's someone trying to get in our house. Wake up." By the sound of my terror and trembling of my voice, Eric shot up out of bed. I never wake Eric up, but whenever I did, it was usually because of bad news, and he knew that. "What's going on?" he said. I told him to hear the sound carefully. I could see his face turn worried. He told me if someone was in the house, the alarm would have triggered, and if they started to come up the stairs, the hallway light would be illuminated as he put an auto feature on to turn on when it sensed movement. Plus, our bedroom door was always locked at night as an extra precaution. He asked me if I checked the cameras with my phone, but I told him I didn't have access to it, and as soon as I heard the sound, I've been trying to wake him up. He picked up his phone and pulled up the camera for the front door. There was a young man in his 20s. He was wearing a green toque, a black Eddie Bauer jacket, blue jeans, and black Nikes. He was ringing the bell and knocking on the door hard. He even was trying to enter the passcode on the keypad to unlock the door. We looked at each other in shock. The biggest nightmare of anyone's life would be feeling unsafe in a home, which is usually supposed to be the most comforting. I immediately grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered. "Would you like a fire truck or ambulance?" I told her, "Police, please." I think when you're in a situation that could be life-threatening, you sort of lose the ability to speak coherently. I knew I sounded dumb, and on the added side, I was still high. I told the woman that I was awoken by pounding on the door followed by ringing of the doorbell. I said my husband was watching the camera as we spoke and could see the man leaning with full weight on the door. The woman asked me if he was swaying at any point or if he looked intoxicated. My husband and I carefully examined the stranger's behavior, and it did look like he was unstable. I told her yes, he appears to be stumbling a bit. Her next question was if he looked like he was carrying a weapon or anything in his hand to break in. I told him it looked like he had a cell phone in one hand, that he was either texting, talking, or communicating to someone through a call, but his other hand was in his pocket, and then it came out from time to time to ring or knock on the door. Maybe it was because it was cold outside. The man then walked away from the door and went to the side of the house. It was a tad foggy, so we couldn't see him beyond that point. He was there for a solid few minutes before returning to the front of the garage and used the keypad to enter the code to get in. When that didn't work, the man went to Eric's white BMW and proceeded to try each door to see if any were unlocked. I relayed this information to the woman on the phone when she suggested that based off of the information, maybe he was confused and thought it was his house as he was trying to ring the doorbell and try the keypad. She told me an officer was on his way and if the situation changed at any point to call her back and tell her. I thanked her and hung up the phone. I sort of calmed down knowing that perhaps it was a misunderstanding, that the stranger genuinely was at the wrong house. My hand was shaking uncontrollably as I put the phone down. The police are on their way, I said. Eric hugged me and suggested I hide in the walk-in closet just in case things got worse, that he would wait in the bedroom to defend himself. I told him that it wasn't necessary, everything was going to be okay because help was on its way, so our anxiety level was lowered a bit. The stranger, however, kept repeating the same routine, knocking, ringing the bell, trying the keypad, going to the garage, trying the keypad there, and then walking to the side of the house. "How much longer?" said Eric. "Maybe a couple minutes," I said. He decided to use the mic on the front door camera and spoke to the stranger. "Who are you and what do you want?" Eric said. The stranger, confused as to where the sound was coming from, mumbled something unclear. Eric proceeded to repeat the question again, and the man finally said, "Neil's progeny." Eric turned to me and said, "That was a weird response." Then he went back to the mic. "Buddy, there is no Neil who lives here. You are at the wrong place. Go away." The stranger still stood there dumbfounded, as if he didn't hear a thing. "I'm going down there," said Eric. "I will tell him to go away in person." I stopped him and said, "If you leave the room, that would trigger the hallway light, and then the stranger will know someone is home. Who knows what he will do? It's better to stay here in case he is also armed. We don't have proof that he isn't." We then looked back at the cameras. From the front door camera, in the far distance, there was a police vehicle pulling up. An officer slowly got out of the car and walked up to the man. They started conversating, and the officer got the man to move away from our front porch and onto the sidewalk in front of the house. The man's posture and demeanor changed all of a sudden. He was walking perfectly straight and looked normal. Was that an act, I thought, to make it seem he was fine so he wouldn't be suspected of other things and arrested? They spoke for quite some time, and I knew the officer noticed our cameras as he looked directly into the driveway one. We saw the man handing over his license to the officer, which probably had his real address on it. Shortly after, the man walks down the street in a different direction away from our house. The officer gets into his car and drives off. The time was now 3:50 a.m. For the remainder of the night, my husband and I were all shooken up that going back to sleep was hard. I tossed and turned before I finally dozed off, but Eric stayed awake watching over me. Until the sun began to rise is when he couldn't fight the sleep and gave in. It was only a couple hours later that at 9:30 we woke up. We were still very much exhausted. I made Eric and I a cup of coffee to wake us up. My parents were coming over for lunch, so we had to do some last-minute tidying up before they arrived. We were definitely dreading telling them the unsettling night we had. They would worry and send themselves into a panic. Since we didn't hear back from the police, Eric figured to call the non-emergency line to get any updates. We were told exactly what the dispatcher had assumed. The man caught himself at the wrong house as the address was different on his driver's license. He was driven home by the police officer. After hanging up the call, Eric and I decided to review the footage from each camera individually from the incident. We had 5 cameras in total, and only 3 had movement recorded during that time. It was the front door, front garage, and right side of the house. The left side and backyard were untouched. Once we got to the side of the house footage, which had the least amount of movement because of the fog, we noticed something strange. 3:50 a.m. was when the officer drove off and the man walked away. But what happened at 3:55 was disturbing. Emerging from the fog was a man, a different man. He was heavier built, average height. He was wearing a toque with a black sweatshirt and black track pants. He had a mustache and thicker beard, kind of like the ones you'd see those motorcycle gang members with. In his hand he had a rope, and in the other, a gun. Eric and I were wide-eyed. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. We didn't find any footage of the man being there while the stranger was trying to get into our house. Curiosity struck us, and we decided to rewind the footage to movement prior to the stranger ringing the bell and trying to get in. About 10 minutes before the stranger got to our front porch, there was a larger-built guy, the same man who came out of the fog, ran so fast to the side of our house and stood there. The fog blocked him completely. As the video leads up to the stranger entering our property and walking to the front door, we can see him texting someone. It then clicks to us. This was all planned out. We were going to get robbed. Eric got up from the couch and walked to the table by the front door. He rummaged through the envelopes that he had placed on the table after checking the mailbox on Friday after work. He found 2 pieces of mail belonging to the previous owner. The name on it was Neil Richardson. Neil was the same name that the stranger had said when Eric asked him who he was. Neil's progeny was the stranger's response, which could mean he was directly related to him. The fact that he was trying to enter the passcode for our house means that he probably took the chance to see if we had kept the old password. But my husband thinks of safety first, and that was the first thing he changed the moment we had gotten the keys. Even if the passcode was still the same, Eric had installed a latch for extra reinforcement. We couldn't believe what our eyes were seeing. All it would have taken was Eric's so-called bravery of answering the front door to get us into the scariest scenario of our lives. We realized that the connection of the stranger to the previous owner was very clear. Perhaps both the men were going to commit a crime based off of some bad fortune in their life, or maybe they just had the thrill. We called the police and passed over the rest of our footage as document proof that there was more to the story than what the officer from the previous night had witnessed. We were told they would investigate and keep a close watch on our home for any unusual activity for the next little while. We couldn't help but feel partly protected by good people and partly afraid that some people were lurking to see us in our most vulnerable moments to attack. That night we were still on edge from what we just experienced. Falling asleep was becoming a tedious, difficult routine. My husband Eric briefly left the room and came back up with the large yellow crowbar. He tucked it behind the bed frame, which was reaching distance to him. He told me that no matter what happened, he wouldn't give up without a fight. That just as much as those strangers were waiting to get in, he was eagerly expecting to get a chance to teach them a lesson. He then turned off the light and held me until I fell asleep. Hey Scary Story fans, I'm Suzanna Dutt, and thanks for listening to these short tales written and narrated by me. I hope you enjoyed them. If you have a creepy story that's fiction or non-fiction and would like me to share in the next featured video, feel free to send it to the email in the description below. In the meantime, sweet dreams.